Hello and welcome again to Bravo 22 Live and our third session in our Masterpiece series, presented by me, Kevin Whyte, and led by Al Johnson, the Bravo 22 Director of Art. All made possible by the Royal British Legion and the Drive Project. Now myself, I've been involved with Bravo 22 for about 9 months, mainly taking part in the many art workshops on offer, alongside virtual workshops and live sessions like we're doing today. Today, we're going to be discussing the famous Japanese print by Hokusai, The Great Wave of Kanagawa. I'll now hand you over to Al Johnson, who will tell us more about this great piece. And remember, we will be taking questions and reading out your comments. So just comment in the live chat and we'll get to it. So Al, over to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kevin. That's a really nice introduction and lovely to be here with you again. This is a part of the series where I'm asking you to suggest things. And actually, this was suggested by Kevin.
Yes.
So, and that's why he's presenting today. So tell us, Kevin, tell us why you chose this.
Well, a few months ago, about 9 months ago, when I first started doing work with you guys, I did a lino print workshop with yourself. And it really did interest me. I thought I was absolutely fascinated by it. Yeah. And obviously on that course as well, you alluded to the fact that people do it with wood as well. And I started looking at different paintings and bits and bobs that people have done. And what intrigues me more is that you get a print like the one I've got behind me, which is The Great Wave of Kanagawa. But I'm more interested in it's a work of art, the blocks that they actually printed on themselves, but the amount of work that goes into these things is absolutely immense. And then you're left with something that all the pieces come together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, but it comes together to make a great piece of art, you know.
So you like that kind of the process of that?
Exactly. And I suppose as well, from an artist perspective, if you are doing prints, so you do various bits and pieces, you do your lino cut or your wood cut. If you didn't like something, you could just reprint it, you know. Yeah. Whereas if you're I don't know, an oil painter or something like that, I think if you make a mistake on that sort of thing, it's a lot harder to remedy the fact that you've
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's the technique is fascinating and really complex. Actually, let's have a look at the print itself. So this is image 1. So it's under the wave of Kanagawa, and it's also known as the Great Wave, which is an easier title, really, by an artist called Hokusai. And Hokusai was Japanese printmaker. He made this print, and I'm rather delighted by this information, actually. He made this print when he was over 70, and I think that's very inspiring. It's
definitely
good news for all of us, isn't it? That we could, keep on making stuff and it gets better and better. And in fact, his best work was when he was over 70. So let's just sort of have a look at the print itself. So it's a woodcut print. It's got this huge arching wave in the foreground, and that's sort of, you can see 2 boats. Actually, there's two little boats, and it's the wave seems to be about to consume the boats, and in the distance, and it's sort of almost like the wave is framing Mount Fuji, which is in the distance, and it comes from a set of prints known as the 36 Views of Mount Fuji. And they were very unusual at the time because it was one of the first time, was the first time that an artist had focused entirely on a landscape. They were made in 1831, so they're quite old. And it's intriguing, really, that this print has become so popular, so well known, and yet probably most people wouldn't know who the artist was. I was texting about this this print the other day, and I noticed that an emoji came up of the wave. So it's that famous that there's an emoji of it. If you put in wave on your smartphone, you'll get an emoji of this Hokusai print. So an extraordinary impact it's had. Now it's made from a wood block, and we can have a look at image 2, which is the key block. So this is the wood block. Now some of you will have been along when Gilly did her woodcut workshop, and she demonstrated, obviously very sort of much simpler system, but she demonstrated how you cut the wood block and how you print it. And this is the key block. So this is the main color block. This is not the original key block, because all of the blocks would have got worn out. They made thousands of prints. So there are prints in lots and lots of collections. In fact, if you wanted to buy a print at the time, it would have cost you about the equivalent of 2 bowls of noodles. So they were really cheap.
Yeah.
You could buy a print really cheap. So they were really widely distributed, and that's partly why it's so famous now, that there were just so many versions of it. There would have been a wood block for each colour. Now, if in an idle moment, you can try and work out how many wood blocks that would be. If you want to count up, what do you reckon, Kevin?
I can just 1, 2. I can 7 or 8. I think maybe.
Yeah. So the key block is the main colour. It's very often the black, actually, or the darkest colour is the key block, because that sort of that one is printed last usually, and it's sometimes first and sometimes last, depending. But it's the one that kind of turns it into an image.
Yeah.
So it's sort of patches of colour till then. There had been really a long period of peace in Japan, and Japan was completely cut off at that time from the West. The Edo period, which is the early 1600s to the late 1800s, been peaceful period, and they built lots of roads in Japan, and people were travelling, and so there was this call for landscapes. People thought it'd be nice to have a picture of the landscape to have on our wall. And so this is how these prints developed, that because of a demand from people travelling around. This one is the most famous. So there's the 36 views of Mount Fuji, and this one is the best known. If we have a look at image 3, we can see Mount Fuji south winds, same paint, made in the same year, and this is another one of the series. Not as impressive, I think, as you can see why the Great Wave is so people love it so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, have we got any comments or questions yet?
Yeah. So obviously, the boats that are in it, are they done from memory, or has he just made them up, or do you reckon this is something that he actually saw?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, artists, whether they're making prints or paintings, until the middle of the 19th century, they're not working outside. They might do drawings and assemble information. They'll do sketches, but they don't actually paint, and certainly a woodcut, you couldn't make that outdoors. You would have it's such a complicated process. So it would have been from memory, but whether it's an invention or not is hard to know. We don't know anything about Hokusai's intentions with these prints. So they were intended to be a series of landscapes, but we don't know whether it was something he saw. I think they're there for dramatic effect. Do you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think. I mean, I think they're fishing boats. I think. Judging by there's a good 8 people on each boat, and I think maybe they'd be maybe some sort of fishing trawler. But like I say, it's interesting the fact that it looks like there's an impending disaster about to strike at least one of the boats, doesn't it?
Yeah. If we go back to, I'm not sure if we can see image 1 at the moment. If we go back to image 1, yeah, we could. It looks like a disaster about to happen. I mean, it's a drama, isn't it?
Exactly.
He's made the wave into this sort of dramatic element of a story.
Yeah.
But we don't quite know what the story is that's being told.
Just had a comment from Sally, and she said it's an amazing piece of art. Are there any of the original prints in existence? So, you know, the first, I don't know, batch of 100 or so. Are there any still in?
There's lots. There's lots all over the world. There's versions. There's some in the British Museum. They've got print. Some in the Met Museum in America. There's lots of big collections, and some actually smaller collections have got a print because they were so widely distributed. What they would do with the blocks is, if something was very popular, so there's a real populist approach to making art. A painting is one-off. You know, you only got one painting. If it's sold, it's gone. A print, you can have thousands of prints. And actually, what they would do is as the woodblock wore out, they would recut it and make a new version. And the colours change slightly as well. There's in the corner of the print. If we look at image 1 again, in the corner there's the title block, and that's the artist and the title, and that in some prints is quite worn out. The edge of that is the edge of that is called a cartouche, and the edge of the cartouche is quite worn in some prints. So you can tell when the print was made by the qualities of the block.
So I'm guessing then, because the guy was in his 70s when he did the originals, and it was so widely used, I guess that other people have emulated them later on in time. Because obviously, I don't know when he died, but
he died in 1849.
Yes. So how old would he have been, and would he have? After his death, were these still being produced?
Well, I think some of them were. Certainly some of his, he did a series of books called manga, the Hokusai manga. Now, manga we now think of as being cartoons, don't we? Japanese cartoons. But manga is actually the word for sketch. So it was used more generally. And his sketchbooks were very widely distributed in his 40s and 50s. He was a teacher, and then he became an artist full-time when he was about 40. Artists in those days in Japan used to change their names according to their period, you know, where they were in life.
Right, okay.
So he was called Hokusai, which means North Studio.
Right, okay.
In his first part of his career in his 40s. He changed his name, and he's actually signed himself something different. Litsu. He's called Litsu on these prints, but he signs it Litsu and then adds the former Hokusai. It's a bit like Prince, you know.
Right, yeah. The artist formerly known as Litsu. Yeah.
That's right. And that was a common thing to do, to change your name at different points in your career. I can't remember if I've answered the question now.
Okay, yeah, you have answered it well. Okay. I got a question from Sarah. She said, how much would it cost to buy an original print today?
Thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably.
And is that
you wouldn't get one for 2 bowls of noodles, I'll tell you that.
No. And is that because they were so widely produced, they were kind of like throwaway items to a certain extent. I suppose they were bought and sold, you know, and because they were so cheap at the time, when they got damaged or whatever, people would just throw them away, or maybe even paint over them themselves and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, some of them were. In fact, one of the as I said, Japan was completely cut off from Europe until the 1860s. and then you start to get sort of trading routes. So Japan opened to trade with the West in 1853. So until then, there were no Japanese goods on the market here. There was nothing known about Japan. It was really closed. And then Japan took a stand at the World Fair, which was very important, sort of culturally, in 1867. And so at that point, people started to really notice what was happening in Japan. And Monet, the very famous Impressionist painter, he said he first came across Japanese prints used as wrapping paper. And he was buying spices in Holland, and the spices were wrapped, presumably spices from Japan, were wrapped in prints. And he was buying these spices, and he found these prints and thought, that's absolutely, those are so beautiful. You know, why are they being used as wrapping paper? So he started investigating them. The painter Whistler says he discovered Japanese prints in a Chinese tea room at London Bridge. Whistler used to hang around London Bridge quite a lot, actually, because he painted the river. So there were little sort of clues about what was, you know, this incredible sort of artistic outpouring in Japan, but people didn't know it well at all. And it became known as Japonism in France, because it was this obsession with Japan. Have we got more questions?
Yeah, I've got one, and there's another one from Sarah. So did he do all the processes? Obviously, I guess by the time he did this, he was 70, you know. So he would, I dare say, have had some apprentices or something like that. So do you think he did it all himself, or do you think he had different people doing things for him?
No, it's unusual for artists to cut the blocks, because, and particularly in Japan, I think Gilly mentioned this actually when she did her workshop, the cutting of the block was a separate skill.
Right.
So he would have designed it and then probably, well, I mean, we don't know for sure, because so not a huge amount is known about the period, and certainly he didn't tell us. So it's, you know, some of it is kind of speculation, but probably what happened is that he would have designed it and then handed the design to the block cutters, who would have cut all the blocks, and then the printers would have printed it. Yeah. So it was a collaborative work, and I think it's something we do need to remember about artists in the past. It's not really, again, until the 19th century, till you get the Impressionist painters, really, who work completely alone.
Yeah.
It's the work of an individual. I think until then, it's a production of a workshop. It's a lot of people involved.
And was he exclusively a printer, or did he do other type of art as well? Like, for example, I don't know if I'm getting the pronunciation right. The sumite, the brush ink work. Did he do that sort of stuff?
He drew. He made beautiful drawings. There was an exhibition in the British Museum a couple of years ago of his work, and the manga book. So he made these books of prints and drawings, which were designs. So they were drawings, but they were designs for prints. So in a way, it was like you could. They were kind of templates almost. So you could. Okay. He published those in 1814, and there were 15 volumes of the manga, the Hokusai manga. And it originally had text, and then he took the text out, and it was just the drawings. So they were drawings for people to use for prints. Yeah. So there's stylized drawings that you could take out of the books and use for prints.
Yeah.
Have we got any other questions?
That's it for now. We've answered all the questions there.
So Hokusai was, as I said, he changed his name a few times. He called himself Hokusai, old man crazy to paint. That was his name for himself. And he said, and it's not true actually, but he said, until the age of 70, nothing I drew was worthy of notice, which is, I think, to do with him really becoming aware of how good these prints were. So when he's around 70, he starts making this, and he eventually makes 102 landscape prints, so these views of Fuji. So he makes the initial 36, and then, which the Great Wave is part of, and then he makes 102 in the end. So has this incredible sort of outpouring of work when he's much older. But the sketches, as I said, were really, really, really important. I think he's part of a kind of bigger tradition, really, because the woodblock prints. He's certainly not the only woodblock printmaker, and they're known as ukiyo-e prints, and ukiyo-e is translated as the floating pictures of the floating world, which sort of ties in with in one respect with the idea of the water.
Yeah.
But actually, it refers to the floating world referred to the brothel district.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In the major cities in Japan during the Edo period. So the floating world wasn't really the water. It was this sort of movement of the prostitutes and the actors, but they became very fashionable. So a lot of prints of this period, the Edo prints, are not actually of landscapes at all, but of rather beautiful Japanese ladies in very decorative landscapes. So it's part of a whole kind of system of making woodcut prints, which were very, as I said, very widely distributed. Any more questions?
Just checking that there. Not at the moment. There's somebody typing at the moment, but I will get back to that one. So if let's say back in the day, and he knocked out 36 of these, were they all I take it some of them were done kind of maybe early on in his career, so some of them will have had a different signature, maybe because of the time scale. I'd imagine it's not something you can do quite quick, and then you can only concentrate on one at the same time if he's actually doing the printing.
Well, he's not doing the printing, he's doing the drawing. So the 36 views, which he signs Litsu, all of those are done after he's 70.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he does these manga books, which are the designs, the 15 volumes. They were enormously popular. I mean, people loved them, and they are really, really beautiful. But he also made versions of this print earlier on in his career. So if we have a look at image 5, this is one of the earlier versions. So this is fast skiffs navigating large waves. That's from 1804. So this is 25 years before he makes the Great Wave.
Yeah.
I don't think it's nearly as satisfactory. Do you? What do you think?
No, I don't either. I think there's a lot more going on in the Great Wave, but then again, he's got the word "great" in it, so it's got to be great.
He's self-serving,
yeah, and I think it just ties in a lot better. The colours look a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the wave's the main focus of the wave's not the first thing you notice, but it is the main thing of the thing. The main thing you notice is because the wave envelopes Mount Fuji. That's what you're drawn to. It's kind of like the wave's pointing to Mount Fuji.
Yes.
So you're kind of drawn to that, but obviously the main element of the photograph is the wave itself, and then you notice all the
I think those the early ones. There's a second one which is Honmoku of Kanagawa, and that image 6. Again, 1807. So this is about 20 years before he makes the Great Wave.
Yeah.
So he was very interested in this idea of the wave and the Fuji itself. Mount Fuji was quite important, I think. It was it had a kind of a significance, a religious significance, I suppose. In Buddhist and Taoist tradition, it was thought to hold the secret of immortality.
All right, okay.
And so framing Fuji in these prints is very significant, and the fact that they're 36 views of Mount Fuji, although the Great Wave is really, we look at the wave, not Mount Fuji. It is Mount Fuji that's the focus, because that's the sort of symbolic significance in the image. One of the names for Fuji was Fushi, which means not death.
Oh, so okay.
It defies Fuji defies death.
Yeah.
I think that his build up to making this print. I mean, he spends a lifetime developing his skills as an artist, developing his abilities in order to make this one thing, and maybe that's the most important thing he does. But that's very Japanese, that idea of spending a lifetime developing your skills. Gilly, I know, mentioned the time it takes to learn to become to cut the blocks, or to become a printer.
I know that blacksmiths, or bladesmiths, should I say, there's a guy who's the master bladesmith in Japan, and he's 90 and his apprentice is 70. And there was a program on it, and he's basically been this guy's apprentice for 50 years.
Yeah.
And they asked him, is he ready to become a master? And he said, not yet. And you just think to yourself,
that's a very a kind of traditionally Japanese attitude, that it takes a lifetime to learn how to do things well. And I think that's really admirable, actually.
It certainly is, yeah. Got a couple more questions. Obviously, with Japan at that time being a cut-off nation, and through their own choosing, I hasten to add, are the waves specific to any symbol or anything like that? And that's from Alice. Are they does waves have a specific meaning in Japanese culture, or do you think it was just used as a frame for Mount Fuji?
I think there's two things going on. One is that it's framing Fuji. I think the water is, Japan is a series of islands, so the water is enormously important. It's would have been their lifeblood, the water. So and they were attacked from the water, when that started to happen. So the water is like the lifeblood and the sort of a fear, I suppose, for Japanese people. But I think in this context, it's partly that it's framing Fuji. It's really the images of Mount Fuji, and the wave is incidental, actually. But also it's to do with this, I mentioned before, this idea of people traveling much more. And there was a new merchant class who could afford to travel, could afford to move out of where they lived and travel around Japan, even though Japan was closed. And so there's this demand for views. It's like, if you go to the Tower of London, you take a photograph and you might put it on your wall. It's the same sort of thing, It's an early equivalent. And because these were cheap, you could do that. You could go think, well, I've seen Mount Fuji, so I'll go and get a print of it, put it on the wall, frame it up, put it on the wall.
Couple more comments. This one's from Matt. Was any of his work used on Japanese pottery or any other kind of utensils in other art forms? Now, I'm guessing you wouldn't you wouldn't be able to print with the blocks on pottery, but I'm guessing that pottery manufacturers would maybe copy the image,
Yeah,
paint it on by hand, maybe.
I think what happened with the manga, the Hokusai manga, the volume, you know, the volumes of drawings, a lot of those were used in other contexts.
Yeah.
I've seen a series of combs, so ivory combs, which had images taken from Hokusai prints carved into the combs, so used as a decorative device. So
Okay.
they were transferred. The images were transferred across to other media. Yeah.
And back then, of course, combs weren't the cheap objects that we have today, were they? They were,
No,
you know,
they were
specialist made.
handmade and
Yeah.
precious things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's a museum in Lincoln. It's about the Vikings. You know, we've got Viking heritage in Rome and stuff, and there's a part of the museum here. They've got a load of combs which were developed from whalebone, and apparently it was quite a sought after profession. You had the comb, you were quite well off.
Imagine making a comb out of bone. It took a long time, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
There was there's a rumor. I don't know if this is true. It might be an apocryphal tale, but there's a story that in Hokusai's workshop, there was a sign on the wall that said, "We don't do fans. We don't paint fans."
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true, but it was it's the idea of doing something populist. You know, what they did was make prints. They didn't paint fans or make combs. You know, they made prints to have on your wall.
Yeah. Oh well, never mind, eh? I've just got a comment from Sally, and she said a bit about waves. She said that waves are often interpreted in dreams and indicate being overwhelmed. Do we think that this may be telling a story of being overwhelmed for any reason? So I suppose it's how you could interpret it, really, isn't it?
I think I mean all cultures have slightly different versions of different symbols. So one of the symbols that I think is really interesting is the blackbird, which in some cultures is lucky and in some cultures is very unlucky. So I don't know. I mean, I'll try and find out actually what the wave means in terms of symbols. But I think when you look at a painting or a print, or look at any art, you bring your own ideas to it, don't you? And if I think it's entirely valid, if that's how it seems to you as a viewer, that this wave is about being overwhelmed. Certainly, those boats are being overwhelmed, but maybe it's about Mount Fuji not being overwhelmed. That it's very serene, the mountain in the background, isn't it? If we just go back to image one again, just for a last look, that the mountain is sort of holding strong, isn't it? It doesn't matter if the people might be overwhelmed and the wave might destroy the fishing boats, but the mountain will still be there. And then maybe that's the story that's being told.
Matt's just commented with a better title for the piece.
Oh yeah, what is it?
An angry sea searching for souls to steal away to Davy Jones's locker. There you go.
That's a combination of a Western and an Eastern tradition there, David Jones's locker. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I think our time is up. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your questions. Lovely questions as always. Thanks, Kevin. That was very good. Very nice to chat with you about the painting.
No problem. Pleasure's all mine. Okay, so thanks, Al. No worries on that one. That was absolutely fantastic. Just to give you some more information about what's going on in the next week or so. So next Tuesday on our channel, we're going to be having the brilliant Claire Murphy exploring the secret power of storytelling. Promises to be an excellent session. Claire's also going to be running a workshop on storytelling on Wednesday at 4 p.m. So there's limited spaces available. So if you are interested in getting involved with that, email Alice Palmer today if you can, and get yourself on the list for that one. Alice's details will be in the comments below. Also on Wednesday, but in the morning, we're going to have Ruth Sullivan running a workshop on the fascinating art of Foley. Again, email Alice if you'd like to sign up for that. And next Thursday, we're going to be back on the live channel with Al Johnson and the fourth in our Masterpiece series. And we're going to be exploring the world of L.S. Lowry. So that's it from me today. And have a good day and get drawing, get doing whatever you're going to do for the rest of the day. Catch you later. Bye.